Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Glenelg Shire Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional lands and waters of the Gunditjmara, the Jali Jali and the Bowendig people and their respective cultural heritages. I acknowledge the elders past and present here at today's gathering and through them to all Aboriginal people. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people provide an important contribution to Australia's cultural heritage and identity. We respectfully acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait community living throughout the Glenelg Shire and the contribution that they make to the Glenelg Shire's prosperity and well-being. Recording of the meetings. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of the Council, you are consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. Council meetings may be live streamed and the Chief Executive Officer will enable a copy of the recording to the public. Declarations of conflict of interest. Councillors, are there any declarations of conflict of interest in tonight's agenda, please? I have one. I have a conflict of interest in item 7.7, private pool and spa safety update for tonight's meeting. No further conflicts? Thank you, councillors. Receipt of apologies. Councillor Gilbert Wilson is an apology for tonight's meeting.
We should take a resolution on that. We should take a resolution of apologies we received on those or something. We don't do that.
We don't normally, no.
Okay, all right.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Carr.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to just put a motion forward that we move question time from the end of the meeting agenda to the beginning of the agenda before the confirmation of the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor McDonald. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Carr?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is just in line with our approved governance rules.
The current governance rules?
Correct.
Okay,
Current
thank you.
governance rules.
Does anybody object to that? I'll put it to the vote. It's been moved by Councillor Carr and second by Councillor Robin McDonald. Those in favour? Carried. Okay, we'll do question time now. Thank you, councillors. We have a question from Matthew Jarlett. First question, I've been attending every council meeting since May 2022. Question time has been at the beginning of the meeting before agenda items are discussed and voted on. What relevance can questions about the agenda items have if the agenda items have already been voted upon? Can you please explain why question time for this meeting has been moved to the end of the meeting rather than before and it's going back? I think the answer is just being made. You can ask questions at any time of council, at any time, and email. The council meeting is for the purpose of council delivering its business, but you'll see there that we have moved it back for tonight's purposes only. Your second question has been mentioned at this month's agenda, the attachment that will be the need to finally draw down on the loan that was agreed to a few years ago. A figure of something up to $7 million may be needed before this year is finished. Over what time frame is it envisaged or planned that this money will be paid back? How will the debt level impact council's ability to undertake major projects within the next 5 years? I'll ask the Director for Corporate Services, Mr. Hole, to respond to that question. Thank you, Mr. Hole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Jarrett, thank you for your question. The term for the loan will be 15 years. We don't envisage having to draw down the entirety of the loan at this point, even at all, but it's more of a consideration that we need to come up with at this point in time. how will this debt level impact the council's ability to undertake major projects within the next 5 years? The response to that is obviously council has limited finances and a limited ability of how much it can actually loan. So it's important to note that this loan is actually to pay for major projects that have already been completed or are actually underway, and these funds have been carried forward due to works not completed.
Thank you, Mr Hall. Questions from Mr Headlam? First question is, given the turmoil of the last 3 years or so, created by the Shire's handling of the rating issue, how do you as Mayor plan to restore the respect and trust of the ratepayers community towards Council? Thank you, Mr Headlam, for your question. I intend to do the best job I can, Mr Headlam, in restoring the trust if you think that that's what we need. So thank you for your question. Does the council still have unfunded superannuation commitments, and was the cost of repairing this building following the flood event fully covered by insurance? What are the costs of these items to council? That's 2 questions, Mr Headlam. I'll ask Corporate Services Director, Mr Hull, to answer that, please. Unfunded super and flood repairs.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Headlam, thank you for your question. The unfunded superannuation commitments still exist. It's monitored on an annual basis about whether the likelihood of the scheme will require a contribution or not. And obviously that's not just limited to the Glenelg Shire, that is many councils within that. Pleased to say that the monitoring of the most recent report indicates that the scheme is functioning okay and that there's no forecast for another call in the foreseeable future, although naturally the share market and finance world can change rapidly. The second part of that is in regards to the insurance of flooding of this particular building just over 2 years ago now. So I can say that it's a bit of both to that question. The insurance damage was fully covered by council's insurance. However, when we're dealing with a building that was circa 1983, we also took the opportunity to update a few things that were outside of the insurance scope. I don't have an exact figure on what that may have been. For example, you can imagine that the original process of all the phone lines throughout the building, an insurance claim does not permit you to be in a better position than what you were. So naturally phone lines, everything's done over a different mechanism of communication now. So there was some modernisation changes that were undertaken as well that were outside the insurance scope.
Thank you, Mr Hall. Mr Hall, just when Mr Headlam refers to unfunded superannuation, just for the audience, I believe it's commonly known as defined benefit scheme.
Correct,
correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Third question is, an article in the local press had the headlines, "Reduced rate cap puts pressure on council." Having just increased the rate take from 3 major rate pay categories, the general, commercial and primary production by 20% or so, when is enough in terms of the rates? Thank you for your question, Mr Headlam. Mr Headlam, we do work under the rate capping, and as you would remember over the years, we've had a fluctuation in percentages, and now it's mandated by the state government on the maximum that council can increase the rates. So that's what we will be following. Michael Byrne. First, I'll read the question. Excuse me, Mr Byrne, thank you. I have 3 questions from you here. Your first...
I'm doing a point of order about that.
You can't do a point of order, I'm sorry.
I'll take you back there, sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. Please
No,
don't...
I was under
That's
that
fine.
I was asked.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Thank
And
you.
I was just going to ask
You-
you,
thank-
Point of order.
come in.
Thank you. Thank you. You can either email those questions through to me. No, I have them here. Thank you.
No, they weren't the, that was just a briefing.
Thank you. Mike Noski. A number of questions here for you. First question. Will you guarantee to ratepayers your commitment that council will stick to the council plan document moving forward means that the 2024-25 budget base general rate revenues will be reduced by 3.49 million compared to 2023-24, and that this change will be included in any financial background information provided to candidates for the permanent CEO position? My response is firstly, when the council plan was developed, it could not foresee the outcome of the rating structure review. Any plan will need to be flexible to accommodate significant unforeseeable changes. Council is currently preparing this year's budget, and consideration for this year's rating income will be undertaken over the next few months, and therefore I'm not in a position to guarantee or preempt any outcome. Second question, can council provide detailed schedules of projected grant incomes supporting these forecasts, specifically which operating grants have been reduced to what capital grants will be paid for projects that are projected to be completed by June 2024? I'll ask Director of Corporate Services, Mr. Hall, could you please respond to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Noski, yeah, we can certainly provide details of the relevant grants. The only operating grant that looks like it reduced in the income statement is actually to account for the early payment of the Victorian Grants Commission, which was paid in the previous year rather than the year after. So that's why there's such a discrepancy in that particular grant between the years. This is not a discussion. I'm answering
Thank you,
the
Mr.
question.
Hall. Continue.
The capital grants to be received in 2023-24, they're estimated to be 9.8 million year to date. That's about 4.2. Capital expenditure associated with this income is projected to be 15.2 million. Some of these projects include the Roads to Recovery program, the local freight roads, the Portland foreshore lighting and ceremonial space project, the Trawler Wharf fuel facility and various local roads and infrastructure, or the LRCI projects. This is based on current estimates of expenditure for the period up to the 30th of June 2024. This is still a moving feast as we go through some of these projects, and each month we meet and work and go through with the relevant project managers how the project is travelling and what the anticipated expenditure is up until the end of June.
With respect, Madam Mayor,
Thank you.
I asked for a list reconciling currently, and I didn't expect
Point of order.
to get
Thank you.
a board statement back.
Thank you. Question 3, if council couldn't revise the 2022-23 budget in June 2022 because of a 3.4 million change in revenues required, that council prepare a revised budget. Can you explain how the Act allows council to accept the CEO's opinion on current circumstances? A reduction of government operating grants income of 8.8 million and an increase of capital works grant income of 17.982 million does not require the 2023-24 budget, adopted budget, to be revised. Mr. Hall, would you answer that question as well, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Mr. Noski. Grants by their nature are uncertain and they don't abide by council budget timelines. Notifications of many grants are included in the forecast budget to address cash flow management. It's not appropriate or practical to revise a budget each time an unbudgeted grant is received, as you can appreciate. These grants typically do not require additional council contribution or at a value that is not above the material threshold in the budget. Notwithstanding the above, if council were to receive a grant that required a significant change in council's own source expenditure, then a revised budget would, yes, need to be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I have a couple of questions here from Mr. Hum, who's not in attendance, but I will read these out. first question is in relation to the 2022 budget was indeed memorable. You are one of 3 councillors here tonight that voted against it. The 3 of you recorded having passionately opposed the disproportionate increase due to the financial and social hardship you consider a proactive opportunity for council to meet community expectations for reducing rate revenue exists in this next budget. Will you therefore advocate that council will simply direct the executive to amend the budget projections to reduce the rate revenue in line with the community expectations for the 2024 budget? Well, certainly council, as you would be imagine, is preparing this year's budget and considering what rate income will be required over the next few months. And of course, I'm not in a position to preempt what the outcome will be. Council will consider the draft budget as recommended, and it's not appropriate to direct executive, as you have indicated, nor do I necessarily agree with the perspective of the community expectation is needed to reflect it in the general community. The second question, this council has a financial management history of budget blowouts on major projects that add a significant cost to the ratepayer. Would you please identify which major projects over the past 5 years that have been budgeted at $100,000 or more have in fact exceeded the original budget figure on completion, and by how much? Mr. Hall, I'll ask you to respond to that, please.
Mr. Hum's not with us tonight. Madam Mayor, I'd first like to say I don't actually agree with the premise of the question that the council has a history of major blowouts. There's been a number of high-profile matters in recent times.
Yes.
The council has for many years delivered a significant amount of projects on budget and on time. In response to Mr. Hum's request for information over the past 5 years, it's very similar to a request that he requested last Friday, which I advised him that the request for an extensive amount of information is not an appropriate use of council staff to go and analyse and draw that information out for him, and that I'd be happy to provide him with specific documents if he can identify those, such as annual reports or council budget documents, which will contain much of the information he seeks.
Thank you, Mr. Hall, and I agree with that. Okay, thank you, councillors. We will move on for the meeting. I'll move on to item number 6, confirmation of the minutes, please. There's a recommendation there on page 3. Councillor Carr. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday the 12th of December 2023 as circulated be confirmed.
Thank you. A seconder. Councillor Alistair McDonald. I'll move that. Those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to item number 7, the management reports. Mr. Hall.
Madam Mayor, the audit and risk minutes are provided for council consideration. The role of the committee is to monitor and advise council on risk, financial management and internal controls. It includes 4 independent members and 3 councillors. The December 7th meeting, the information there is provided. I'd highlight some key topics in the report in regards to the climate change adaptation audit and the HR workforce management audit. Significant focus on the committee, as you'll see from the items there, councillors, is in IT security and risk, and we have an updated pen test scheduled, which will come up to councillor consideration in the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Are there any questions, councillors?
Good.
Councillor Martin?
I've got a lot.
You go first.
Sure, all right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Director of Corporate Services, Mr. Hall. You mentioned the pen testing and deferring of the cybersecurity testing. Is there any particular reason it was deferred?
The activity is actually is scheduled to be undertaking in February. So by the time the test is undertaken, the report's considered and analysed, it won't be in time to have a final report presented to the next council meeting of the audit committee, which will be early March.
Awesome. You also mentioned the climate change adaptation. Why does council do that, and what is a good example of council doing that?
I guess it's the question is a little bit different than me. Is why do we have an internal audit plan on climate adaptation?
Yep.
From a corporate perspective, climate change is listed in our organisational risk register as one of our significant issues that we need to manage. As highlighted in the audit plan, this particular audit looked at how well council is prepared across a number of different areas. Recent storms, bushfires and weather events sort of highlight those exposures. Council also has implications through its planning scheme in particular about how to manage future climate change and what that means for ratepayers of the organisation and their property.
So it's like rising sea levels. We're planning for those, obviously, inevitable scenarios. Great, beautiful. Mr Headlam actually stole my thunder there and yourself. The defined benefits scheme. I noted there that council, since 1994, had to top up the superannuation there of $8 million. I noticed it came close again in 2022-23. So what is that? A bit more in detail about that, and is council at risk or are all councils at risk?
The defined benefits scheme, in a summary, is a scheme that has been discontinued that many councils were involved in, and as the name suggests, the superannuation is on a defined amount, not necessarily the amount that how the share market is actually travelling at that particular time. The liability for those schemes goes long before long after any employees involved have ceased working for council. It can travel on to spouses and those things as well, and other partners. So yes, there is certainly a liability for that. It could arise again in the future. However, as in my earlier explanation, the current market trends with how that fund is travelling is that there's no suggestion that it'll be called on again in the near future. However, it does remain a significant risk in the organisational risk register.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. One final question, if I may, Madam Mayor. Something that excites me, the Enterprise Resource Program. I noticed that we're wary with that, and what is it, how it improves council efficiency? Or could potentially improve council efficiency?
Councillor, I think that particular topic is a lot more in depth, and there'll be certainly some further information coming up to council on that in the next few months. It is quite in depth. It wouldn't do it justice for me to provide just a short summary of that at this particular point in time.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Cole?
Oh, sorry.
Nothing further.
Nothing further? Any further questions, councillors? All right, there's a recommendation there on page 4. Councillor Carr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Seconder, Councillor Northcote.
I move the recommendation that council receives the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 7th of December 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Second by Councillor Northcote. Thank you. Any discussion, Councillor Carr?
No, nothing further to add, Madam Mayor.
Okay. I'll put the motion, moved by Councillor Carr and second by Councillor Northcote. Those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to 7.2, Councillors' Quarterly Expenditure Report. Mr Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing out of the ordinary in this report. It's a standard quarterly report and it's all pretty much in order.
Yep, thank you. Councillors, any questions? No, it is quite straightforward. Councillor to move. The recommendation is tabled on page 7. Councillor Robin McDonald.
I'll move, Madam Mayor, that Council receives the Councillors' Quarterly Expenditure Report for the period 1st of October 2023 to the 31st of December 2023.
Second by Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any discussion on that, Councillor Robin?
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to add that every dollar that councillors do spend is recorded here, so that is available for people for public viewing.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. I'll put the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Robin McDonald, second by Councillor Martin. Those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to 7.3, the Glenelg Shire Council Financial Report, December 2023. Mr Hall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of notes here. Some of the positives. We have a higher interest income than we estimated in budget. Obviously, when we did our budget, the rates were a lot lower than what they are now. Again, we've had some more income. There's some minor grants, again, that's not budgeted, which sort of supports the response to Mr Nusky earlier. Our total income for the month increased by 660k. You'll see that we're about $3 million short of the scheduled income at this point in time. One of the main reasons there is a large roads funding capital grant that hasn't come through as we'd hoped is timely, so that's a $2.2 million discrepancy. Other funding there is mainly due to the A&D, Age and Disability Services transition that we talked about the previous month. However, our total expenses have increased $4.6 million, so there's certainly some seasonal work that's underway with that. Our employee costs are slightly under still, so again, that's a lot to do with some vacancies that we have. But we also do have some unbudgeted expenditure popping up from some of the situations that we've got at the moment. Our materials and services is tracking $1 million under budget. But council is, the President of the Budget last year would be aware that we've actually got to achieve 400k under budget to actually meet that obligation. Our capital expenditure increased by 600k in the month. We're certainly hoping that that's able to ramp up over the next few months. We're down to, as you see, the forecast of $4.1 million cash. It is getting rather tight, so you'll see there's a report later on to consider accessing the loan in order for cash flow purposes.
Thank you, Mr Hall. Any questions from councillors, please? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Hall, I just noticed the asset renewal ratio is sitting at approximately 87%, which appears to be a lot better than previous periods. I'd like you to just explain how that affects our assets. Is it likely to stay at that level?
The short answer is no. So we have some data integrity issues about the age of some of our items. Our best estimates is actually our asset renewal is about 50%. Essentially, when council's considering the upcoming budget, our renewal budget is about $5 million. So if we continue to put in $5 million, you will not see any increase in the asset renewal gap going forward. So, but it also comes down to the number of assets that council has, and certainly multi-use assets is something that is forefront of council mind.
Beautiful. You also mentioned our cash flow position relative to our liabilities. Why is that important? Why is trades and other receivables so high at this moment?
Essentially, we've got we'll have our rates due on in early February. It's also a timing issue at the particular time of the year where we do have a number of outstanding requirements. As I mentioned, there's a $2.2 million grant that we were expected to receive by now.
Yep, cool. And the last question, if I may, Madam Mayor. Also in the report, I noted the equity reserve increased significantly. What effect does that have on the depreciation figure of the income statement? Has that any flow-on effects?
I'd have to refer that to the CFO and get a more detailed response on that, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Hull.
Thank you. Any further question, councillors? There's a recommendation there on page 10. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the council receives the financial report for the period ending December 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. A seconder, Councillor Carr.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam. Yeah, just quickly, as the Director of Corporate Services alluded to, there is another agenda item that links to the financial statements, and it's important to understand where we're at, looking to the future with some big ticket items that need to be looked at now, not when they're actually falling down and they need to be done in a decade's time. So we're not in a poor financial position by any stretch of the imagination. However, we do need to manage our finances quite carefully. Looking at those key performance indicators and ratios to make sure we're in a strong financial position when the time comes to replace some of those larger ticket items, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Carr.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think the key thing for us to get our head around is this is the December report, and we have got another agenda item just looking at that $7 million worth of borrowings, and I'll be asking, well, I'm sure it'll be covered off in detail when we get to that.
Thank you, Councillor
Topic.
Carr. If there's nothing further, I'll put the motion that was moved by Councillor Martin and seconded by Councillor Carr. Those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to 7.4, the borrowings policy. Mr Hole, busy night for you tonight.
It is, Madam
It
Mayor.
is.
This is a new policy providing a framework and guidance around accessing loans and for what purpose. It aligns with the council obligations for financial management principles as outlined in Part 4 of the Local Government Act, particularly Section 104 regarding borrowings. As I alluded to, it's timely given our current cash flow and our preparation for the 24-25 budget. Currently, we're looking at a rate cap of 2.75%, which for council's terms equates to 688k. It'll put a further strain on council funding sources as expenditure and CPI outstrip the rate cap, potentially resulting in council having to consider further loans in coming years. The policy talks about that technically you would not be providing loans for operational matters, and it's for large-scale projects. Generally, that would be generational in their nature.
Thank you, Mr Hall. Questions, councillors? Councillor
Thank
Martin.
you, Madam Mayor. Mr Hull, it was good to see this policy come up. Doing the MAV financial training, I guess in my first year as a councillor, the debt servicing ratios and the borrowing ratios were highlighted by MAV that councils need to follow, otherwise they throw up some red flags to the government, I guess. So I think it's a good policy to have, and it gives councillors and I guess the general public an understanding of how we go about borrowing, what we can actually borrow. We're not an endless source of money. We do have financial obligations that we do need to meet. So this gives a good outline of those.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was probably should have been a question, not a speech. Sorry, Mr Hull.
Yeah, so I was just wondering where the question
Sorry, I was going off tangent.
wondering where
Sorry,
the
Madam
question
Mayor.
was. Do any councillors have any questions?
Sorry.
Councillor Carr, try on a question.
How were borrowings managed in the past prior to having a policy on borrowings?
Through my time in the role, Councillor Carr, we haven't actually needed to draw down on the borrowing. I could not tell you precisely.
Okay. I'll clarify. We do have some loans at the moment, though.
Yeah, so we have a loan outstanding going back from many years, which we're nearly finished paying off.
Yep.
We've included amounts in budgets in the past 5 years, but haven't need to actually draw down on any new loans in that period of time.
Can you just
Thank you,
ask a
gentlemen.
follow-up question, Madam Mayor? With the borrowings, I believe, do we have to do an update to the waste transfer station that cost the council a significant amount of money? Was borrowings were done then, is that correct?
So as I said, the borrowings that we've got in the budget of $7 million account for a number of projects that have already been completed and are still underway. So yes, some of those borrowings were for the works in the waste area, but because of our stature of our capital works, we had plenty carry forward, so we didn't actually have to draw down the loans. So what we're talking about now, this is not a loan for new projects. This is basically a loan for things that have already been completed, and basically we're getting to the stage now where our carry forward amounts are catching up to our expenditure.
I think, Councillor Carr, to answer your question, in my time on council, if a large project was done, there would be a business case put forward to council, and it would be part of the recommendation that we may need to borrow funds. As Councillor Martin said, that was the recommendation for rehabilitation of the landfill sites. So it's multi-generational, but we have the funds there, so we've never had to draw down on it.
Yes. Technical difficulties.
Councillors, if there's no further questions, there is a motion on page 12 for you to consider. Is there a movement and a second? Councillor Carr?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the recommendation that council adopts the proposed new council borrowings policy, CPO-C Corps-F1-006.
Thank you, councillor Carr. Is there a seconder? Councillor Robin McDonald. Thank you. Did you wish to speak to this, councillor Carr?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think it's great to have a policy in place for borrowings, and it's good to see that it also went to the Audit and Risk Committee prior to coming to council for their comment and feedback.
Thank you. Councillor Robert McDonald, did you want to make any comment? If not, I'll put the motion moved by councillor Carr and second by councillor Robert McDonald. Those in favour? Carried. We'll move on to 7.5, which is borrowings in the budget for 2023-24. Mr Hull.
Madam Mayor, as alluded to, cash flow is becoming tight. Our outstanding expected grants and several weeks until rate payments due may result to a need to access the loan facility. This is a cash flow that's monitored essentially on a day-to-day basis. Councils will be aware that there is a provision for $7 million already included in the budget, so we cannot undertake any loans if it's not in any approved budget going forward. The report requests authorisation from two possible sources. So we have our National Australia Bank loan facility that was set up many years ago and has been essentially carried forward to enable us to access that, and that is ready to go at a moment's notice if we need. We do also have the option of borrowing through TCV, or the Treasury Corporation of Victoria, as well, which depending on the interest rate is obviously which will take the one that's more appropriate at the time. We're recommending a council resolution to access. It will only be drawn down if needed based on cash flow variability. It certainly won't be the full $7 million loan. It would be probably $1 to $2 million at most if needed, and as I said, depending on a number of factors, such as if we that outstanding grant, when that actually comes in, we'll have our rates payment due in early Feb, so it'll just be a matter of getting by in this particular time and then reevaluate if we need to draw down further as the capital works program progresses closer to the 30th of June.
Thank you, Mr Hull. Questions from councillors, please. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. So you have to hear me out because we haven't. Anyway, this might take a bit.
Did you plan that, by the way, councillor Carr?
$7 million. We've got an overdraft approved for $4 million already. Is that correct?
We no longer have an overdraft facility, councillor.
Okay. What is the amount with the NAB? Have we got no ability to manage our cash position? What's our ability to manage our cash position at the moment?
At the moment, our cash position is getting quite low. We have creditor payments and payroll payments twice a month. For example, the creditor payment I think last week was about $2.5 million, so we're getting actually quite close to that particular mark. It's a timing issue as far as when income is coming in. So this is why we'll be looking at drawing down the loan with the NAB. The original loan with the NAB was $7 million back when it was first initiated back in about 2020. So the capability that's sort of been counting down, even though we haven't drawn it down. So the maximum amount that we'd possibly get from that NAB bank would be about 5.8 now.
Yeah, okay. So the existing approved loan facility, you're saying is about 5.8?
Yes, it was $7 million in 2020, although it hasn't been drawn down, it ticks down.
And the end of the financial annual report, the overdraft facility of $4 million, is that gone?
Correct.
Okay.
If I can elaborate on that, so the banking facilities that council and through the MAV scheme are with changed, and the banking provider came through that, and there's no overdraft provision provided in that. Council could go and seek an overdraft that's outside the scope of those contract terms, but that will be an additional cost. It has been, I don't think our CFO can recall ever having to use an overdraft facility before in her time.
verbally, I think I heard we might need up to 1.2 million, but we're asking for approval to go up to 7 million.
Correct. So the minimum amount will be drawn down to ensure essentially that we don't run out of money over the next couple of weeks. It's a day-to-day proposition about how we're managing the cash flow as it comes in. The total loan amount is up to $7 million. So that'll be, as I mentioned, re-evaluated closer to the end of the financial year because it'll be pending on how the capital works that we've actually got slated in to go to the 30th of June, what the expenditures are on them will determine how much more we actually need to draw down, if at all, this financial year. But at this point in time, if the expenditure goes as we're forecasting, I imagine that we'll be looking at drawing down some further loans closer towards June.
Okay. The next question. The Treasury Corporation Victoria component, in the commentary, it talks about the council to provide security in the form of a charge over council's general rates. What does that mean?
Essentially like a security of the loan.
Well, so I suppose it'll be clearer. Will that be passed on to the ratepayer, or is it?
There'll be interest components part of any loan, which will be allowed for in a budget.
Okay. Not sure I understand.
Can I just add to that? It's not additional money that would come. We would have to find it out of rate revenue.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we're not putting another charge onto the ratepayer.
No, we're not able to do that. We have to stick within the rate cap. So I
Thank
think if
you.
I understand your question, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it for now.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Alistair McDonald.
Question to Mr. Hole. So theoretically, this $7 million, it's not an overdraft as such.
Correct, it's a loan.
It's a loan, but you only draw down what you need. So it's not a line of credit as such.
Correct.
It's a loan, yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So when the rate revenue comes in, rate payment date's about the 16th or 17th of Feb. So that'll put us well in the black. Temporarily.
Yes, temporarily.
Is that correct?
Hopefully the rates come in at that time.
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Any
Mayor.
further questions from councillors? If not, there's a recommendation on page 14. Do we have a mover? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the recommendation that Council 1 approves the use of the existing approved loan facility with the National Australian Bank and 2 enters into a new loan agreement with TCV for an amount which, combined with the National Australian Bank existing loan, will not exceed the $7 million. And 3 authorises the CEO to execute all documents relating to this loan approval.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Carr. Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just some quick commentary. I think Council's been very lucky due to COVID that we received a lot of upfront payments that essentially we're sitting in a side account for Council that we're able to cover loan repayments, so we didn't actually have to have those interest payments. Unfortunately, that's now coming to an end with the projects that we're undertaking, and that is why we're now needing to draw down on the loan. But we've been very lucky over the last few years in that position of not having to pay those interest rates. And it probably leads to Mr. Jowett's question earlier on, why it's a good reason to have these questions at the end, because this would have probably answered that question.
Thank you. Councillor Carr, any comments?
No, nothing further to add, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The motion has been moved by Councillor Martin and second by Councillor Carr. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, 7.6, the Government Rules Update. Mr. Hole.
Madam Mayor, at the Council's December meeting, they resolved to send the draft amendment government rules for public consultation. The report provided outlines the submissions and responses on this document. Quite a good response in numbers. There's 29 submissions received. There's a few negative responses without any detail. There were, however, a number of supportive submissions, and there was about 4 or 5 that took the time to provide constructive criticism and offer suggestions. A copy of the submissions provided is in an attachment to the report for councillors. It's fair to say that most of the submissions mainly focused on the question time component. The proposed changes are consistent with many other municipalities. As you highlighted earlier, the council meeting purpose is for consideration of the agenda items. It's not a platform for individuals to raise their own agendas or debate with councillors. Several amendments and refining of the document has occurred based on the submissions and other feedback provided, including some councillors, CEO, other staff going through. The report outlines the significant changes undertaken from the submissions, as well as referring to some of the elements that were not supported. The amended version was provided for councillor consideration. Since that, there's been 2 changes that will be implemented, requiring the chair rather than the CEO to read questions, and retaining the 3 questions per person rather than 2 as proposed will be permitted.
Thank you, Mr Hall. Questions, councillors? Councillor McDonald? No? Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr Hall, from the feedback we received, and obviously that's published in documents there, how much would you say was actually consumed but also then put into the documents? From what I can see here, a lot of the suggestions that people put forward from the community have actually been incorporated into the document itself.
I would agree. Mr Councillor Martin, the report sort of outlines some of those elements where some minor wording changes and suggestions were taken on board. It's always good to have a different perspective and reading such a document. The report also outlines some of those considerations that weren't supported to be changed. Some of them relate to concerns with certain phrasing. However, they're pretty much as what's required under legislation. So there's an education component with that as well. As I said, there's some comments about the language. The report highlights that governance rules, and they are rather authoritative in their language generally. So we've certainly tried to adopt and take consideration of some of the, particularly the more thoughtful submissions that came in, and provided some suggestions. And I hope that those people that took the time for those submissions will note where their suggestions have been taken on board by council.
Thank you, Mr Hall. And the other one, I noticed one of the submissions was talking about a code of conduct for councillors. You know, is this the code of conduct for councillors? I know that's a silly question to ask because I know what the answer is, but I thought...
I think obviously that submitter was mistaken. The code of conduct is a separate document.
Thank you, Mr Hall.
Councillor Carr?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, my question relates to section 55, submissions to council. Can you expand on the .1, the verbal submissions process to council?
So the particular submissions has been clarified. There's, in some submitters, they expected that they had basically a right to provide a verbal submission to council at their choosing. The governance rules in that section clearly highlights that if council's going out for a community consultation and they're going to invite verbal submissions as part of that process, then that will be in the resolution of council at the time, and it's not necessarily a given that verbal submissions will be received on every item that goes out for community consultation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Notice of rescission motions. What drove the change in the notice of rescission around the number of people required before it could be put forward?
Councillor Card, that was simply reflection when looking at other council governance rules, and particularly that section. It was the examples that we looked at obviously had a more refined process of making sure that it required additional councillors rather than just one to initiate a rescission of motion process. It's important to note that one submitter did not understand that still needed to go up to a vote. Obviously with a rescission, process where things can already be enacted quite quickly following a resolution, that we felt that that area needed to be strengthened.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions, councillors? Perhaps, Mr Hall, 371 visits to our platform, and it was downloaded over 100 times, and out of that 29 submissions were received. So, I think that we had extended time consultation period. I think that's a really good reflection of the fact that we did have some criticism around council putting it out over Christmas, but that's probably one of the highest rates that we've had of downloads and visits to Your Say Glenelg on our consultation. So I think it proves that it was worth the effort. Okay. I will put the motion. There's a recommendation on page 17. Movers, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is slight change to number 2. I move that Council 1 respond to and thank those submitters who took the time to provide a submission on the draft governance rules and adopts the amended draft governance rules with the changes as described by the Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Martin.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carr, did you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I've read this document 4 times, 5 times, 6 times now, and I really do appreciate all the effort that the community put in to the submissions. It really helped consolidate these rules for me. I thank all the other councillors and I thank the staff. I mean, there's a power of work and effort that went into revising a set of rules for how this council runs, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this play out over the next 6 to 8 to 12 months for council.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just obviously want to address the elephant in the room. There's no conspiracy, no loss of democratic rights as been touted by a few people. In fact, most of the issues actually raised by people have actually been in the governance rules for years, and we've been very liberal. I think I was on the record as saying we have one of the most liberal councils going around with engaging with our constituents. The fact that the scaremongering that people won't be able to ask questions of council, well, you can call council 9 to 5. We have 1300 Glenelg. Anyone can bring that and ask questions. Email, you can email 24/7, and you can contact councillors as well. You don't have to wait one time every month to actually ask a question. Council is very accessible. That was the main points, Madam Mayor. I know these changes have obviously come from recommendations from some of the monitors, and I think that this council will be there for.
Thank you, Councillor Martin.
Can I say something too, Madam Mayor? I'd just
will
like to
allow.
thank Mr Hole and his staff for a great job.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillors, it's been moved by Councillor Carr and second by Councillor Martin. Those in favour? Carried. Yes. Thank you, Mr CEO. What's next? Councillors, 7.7, private pool and spa safety update. I've declared a conflict of interest in this item. Councillors will need to appoint an acting chair. I look for a recommendation, please, councillors.
Madam,
Mr Martin, Councillor Martin.
Councillor Martin.
I'll defer, Madam Mayor, and I actually recommend Councillor Carr to take the seat as...
Thank you. Is there a seconder for Councillor Carr to move? Thank you, Councillor Robin McDonald. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Michael, Councillor Carr, I'll leave my agenda item here if you wish to just leave yours.
Thank you, Mr Hole. Item 7.7.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. The pool and spa update. It's provided for council information on the implementation of this particular building regulation. It is an example of additional expectations on council service delivery that occur without any funding or additional staffing provisions that are provided, and then still to be fit within any applicable rate cap as well. Overall, as the report outlines, Glenelg Shire is well placed. Most pool owners understand the rationale behind the regulations following a number of catastrophic incidents in recent years. There are also some limitations with these regulations with pool owners where they're able to access the relevant expertise to enable compliance and certification of their particular pools. I did reference a VARGO audit on how councils were complying with this. One of the recommendations from that is for an internal procedure to be developed by relevant councils, which is something that's being finalised with staff at this point in time.
Thank you. Councillors, questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Councillor Robin McDonald.
Director Holt, can you just explain? I'm just asking, do currently pool owners self-regulate in terms of the current situation?
Prior to this regulation being put in as part of the building regulations 2018, there was no regulation on previous pools that had been constructed some time ago. Obviously new pools are constructed to certain standards, but it certainly wasn't retrospective, and mentioned there was a number of catastrophic incidents that occurred. Government responded by making sure that there's a mandatory registration of all pools. As the report outlines, it's a floating schedule about when pools were commissioned as to when they're actually required to go through this process, and then it's every 4 years after that that they'll need to maintain compliance with their pools.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
No.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Mr Hull, you mentioned obviously that we don't get any funding for this because I couldn't see any of that on page 39 of the budget. Would this be a good example of cost shifting the state government onto local councils?
I believe so, yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Hull. Not controversial at all.
Any further questions? There's a recommendation on page 25. Councillors.
I'm prepared to move that recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Northcote, seconded by
I'll second it.
Councillor Alistair McDonald.
He's directing me.
Mr Northcote.
No,
would you like
nothing
to-
really to say to it, Mr Acting Mayor. It's good to see that it's happening, really, because as you say, there's losses and you need safety for the little tackers, and they do need to learn to swim too. Like, I mean, as in drownings around the state of Australia are increasing seemingly exponentially, and if the people who've got the pools can teach their kids to swim, all the better for it. Thank you.
Councillor Alistair McDonald, would you like to say anything?
Oh, no, it's good. Thanks.
Councillor
Mr
Martin.
Acting Mayor, if I just may say one thing, I think it might be a good example, a good idea if this council in the future perhaps costs what this does cost on the council, and see if we can actually apply for any grant funding from the state government to cover this cost.
Thank you. Into a vote. All those in favour? 5-0. Moved by Councillor Northcote, seconded by Councillor Alistair McDonald. Thank you, councillors. I'd like a motion now to vacate the chair, I suppose.
I don't need the
You
motion.
don't need it? I'll vacate.
Just need the mayor back.
councillors. 7.8, Business and Tourism Awards 2024. Director of Community Development, Ms Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yep.
Yes.
Pretty short and straightforward report. Looking to move the Business and Tourism Awards to August 2024. Previously held in May 2022. There's an error in the report. It refers to the Portland Yacht Club. It was actually the Portland Golf Club where they were held. Since COVID, we've had some staff shortages with the shutdown of events in the state of Victoria. We've also got a budget shortfall for this event. $5,000 has been allocated in the current budget. With the limited capacity in the team, we don't believe we can deliver a high quality event in the time frame between now and May. And we think delivering in August would be better aligned to Small Business Month in Victoria. So I'm happy to take any questions on this report.
Thanks, Ms Miller. Questions, councillors? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms Miller, I noticed in the report there that there is we obviously allocated $5,000, but the actual income required from council is $35,000. So that's a $30,000 shortfall in this budget.
Correct.
Correct. And you also mentioned some constraints with regards to having an actual tourism team to carry out the event. I'm assuming there's not one currently there. We're currently advertising.
Yes, correct. We had a resignation late 2023, so just before Christmas, so we're looking to go out for recruitment.
So it's quite possible that it might take another month or two for someone to be employed along with a CEO as well. So they might be arriving right at the time when we've got new staff, and it's not ideal either to have it in August.
So no, not ideal.
Well, assuming we have staff, we're making a few assumptions.
Yes, by
there.
August we will definitely be.
We will.
Yeah.
Yes. I think what Ms Miller was saying, that it's not appropriate, it would be difficult to have it in May, so she's suggesting on moving it to August. Was that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Can I ask one further question, Madam
Yes,
Mayor?
certainly.
Sorry. Is there any implications if it gets moved to the following year?
No, that would be a decision for council. If they would like to do that, we can do that. If you want to move it to May 2025, is that what you're suggesting?
Or to give more time, that would be my question, is to give more time to have the right staff in the employment along with the new CEO who's not facing a significant event, because it is quite a large event, in my opinion. I don't know what councillors feel how the event is, but it's certainly one that's quite significant in the Shire.
Yeah, that's a decision for council.
Thank you, Councillor Martin.
Can I
Councillor Alistair McDonald.
Can I just add to that, Ms Miller, that it is a significant drain on the budget, and it's all subject to sponsorship and ticket sales, of course. I agree with Councillor Martin that it might be in the council's interest to defer it till 2025. We'll have a new council, new CEO, and hopefully we'll have some staff on board. And it is a great event, and it's very important to the business and tourism for the Shire. And I agree with Councillor Martin that deferral would be appropriate.
Can I just ask a question?
Councillor Robert McDonald.
Director Miller, could you just explain why $5,000 would have been allocated when the total cost was nearly $67,000 in 2022? I know part of that is from sponsorship, but 35 of it was from council. So why would that discrepancy happen if we knew what was required? Yeah, I wasn't here at the formation of the current budget, so I couldn't answer that. Director Hull may have some further insight, but unless there was a miss in the every second year, and that could have been the answer to that question at the time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So during the... sorry, Ms Miller. Is the plan to try and get this into the budget process for the next financial year? And have we costed it up so it's considered as part of that process?
Short answer is yes.
Yes.
Whether it's in May or August, in the next financial year, any event.
Yeah.
Should the decision be in line with other councillors not to hold it in May and for them to come back with another date after the budget process has been finalised. What I'm getting at, there's no guarantees that this event will make the budget.
No, that's right, and can I,
Yes,
through you,
thank
Mayor?
you.
That's correct. The reason it was put up in this form is so that we'd go into the budget process, but it was always open for council not to allocate appropriate funds. I think the danger of not putting a proposal and date in, it might be that if you decided, it's too late to decide in June that you're going to do it in August. So if you're not proposing to do it in this calendar year, then it wouldn't matter, and you could simply refer this to the budget process. But effectively, you're preventing it occurring in the calendar year, and that may be consistent with what councils want, and that's fine. So there's a couple of alternatives being put up, both of which are fine. One is that it be deferred to May 2025. The other one could be that the matter be referred to the budget process. But I just highlight that second option means that it wouldn't happen this calendar year, there just wouldn't be time.
Understood.
Any further questions, Councillor Carr?
No.
Any further questions from any councillors?
Well, Madam Mayor,
Councillor
it
Northcote.
might be a bit interesting how this vote could go when the recommendations will be hosted in Business and Tourism Awards in August 2024.
That's what the recommendation is.
Yes.
But you don't have to move the recommendation, you can move something different.
Okay, there is a recommendation on page 27, councillors, for your consideration. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the recommendation that council host the 2025 Glenelg Shire Business and Tourism Awards in August 2025.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Could I just, for clarity,
Yes.
Yeah.
That
suggest...
would be the following then financial year.
Yeah, no, but just for clarity, given that there was one scheduled, if you just, instead of the 2025 Glenelg, put in the next Glenelg, so that's clear that we're not going to run one before then. So if the motion was to read that council hosts the next Glenelg Shire Council Business and Tourism Awards in August 2025, that would be clear.
Can I just ask you a question, Mr. CEO, just in relation to this? This council will be, the next council election is in October of this year. I'm just wondering why this council would determine that we're going to have impose the Business and Tourism Awards on the next council. Would the decision be not the council doesn't hold the 2024 Glenelg Shire Business and Tourism Awards this year, and it be set for consideration for the...
Well, you would have to achieve what you're after there in that suggestion, and any of these suggestions are open for council to adopt. You'd have to be clear that it wouldn't be held in this financial year or the next financial year, because the proposal that's being put up by Councillor Martin would be that it would go to the following budget. So if you were to take Councillor Martin's suggestion, you're effectively saying it's not going to go into this year's budget and therefore wouldn't happen this year, even with the new council. So you just probably need to test out what you want to do. If you don't want to hold it if you don't think it should be held until August 2025, then Councillor Martin's way of dealing with it would achieve that, because a new council would struggle to start again and pick a different date anyway.
Needs to be in the budget.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it would then go in the new council's budget if you put yours up. So that would be fine doing that, if that's what council's overall view was.
Just a point of order, Madam Mayor. We have a motion and a seconder,
Thank you.
so I think we need to deal with it.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Is there anybody opposed? There's a motion on the table. Is anybody opposed to that motion? Speak against it?
Sorry, can I just...
Say again, please.
For clarity, are you prepared to pick up the next in your opening part?
Sorry, that I did defer it to 2025 in the
2025.
August 2025, but I think Ms Miller did mention that, is it May?
Yeah, originally, traditionally
May.
it's held in May.
So
but
you've moved August 2025. My question is to change the wording to the council
So
hosts
the
the
council
next.
hosts the next
Glenelg.
Glenelg Shire Business and Tourism Awards in August 2025.
I think that was your intent.
That was my intent, yes.
So the word is next.
Yes, sorry, next. Oh, yes, I'll clarify. The council hosts the next Glenelg Shire Council Business and Tourism Awards in August 2025.
Thank you.
Clarity, sorry.
Did you want to speak to that, Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Well, just a second. Yes,
Certainly.
certainly. Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I sort of indicated through questions through Ms Miller, obviously the finances there. We're having to find an additional $30,000. We also have a lacking of a tourism team, so we're counting on one being up and running if we were to go with that original recommendation. And we're also assuming that we were also going to have a CEO on board by that time as well. So that's two assumptions that I don't like to make. I'd rather have the new council that's elected in October being able to come in and, with a fresh start, fresh set of eyes, along with the CEO, tourism team, and have a really good crack at it. I think that's the better way to go rather than potentially having some issues down the track.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, totally agree with Councillor Martin, and deferring it is I think, a better option than the current option.
Thank you. So we're clear on the recommendation that Council host the next Glenelg Shire Council Business and Tourism Awards in August 2025. It has been moved by Councillor Martin and second by Councillor Alistair McDonald. Those in favour? That is 5. And you're against, those
Yes.
against?
Madam Mayor,
Yeah, against? Do you want a division? No? Okay. The motion is carried 5-1. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on to 7.9, Operational Services Agreement, Local Port of Portland Bay. Mr. Director of Infrastructure and Assets, Mr. Husband.
Thank you, Mayor. This report is to recommend that the Council approve the letter of offer to extend the local Port of Portland Bay Operational Services Agreement. This is an extension to the existing local Port of Portland Bay Operational Services Agreement between Department of Transport and Planning and Glenelg Shire Council up until the 30th of September 2028. Local Port Operations currently employs 2 council staff funded by this agreement. The department uses an internal process to determine funding to cover operating expenses, maintenance, minor capital improvements, etc. over the life of the 5-year agreement. Funding is assessed annually by the department. Open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Husband. Any questions? Councillor Alistair McDonald.
Mr. Husband, is the local port still a break-even proposition?
It is correct, Councillor. Yes.
Great.
Any further questions? There is a recommendation there tabled on page 29 for consideration. Is somebody prepared to move?
I'll move that recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Alistair McDonald.
That Council, number 1, endorses the offer to extend the local Port of Portland Bay Operational Services Agreement to 30th of September 2028. Number 2, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to execute all documents relating to this contract.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Seconder?
I will
Councillor
second that, Madam
Northcote. Councillor Alistair McDonald, would you like to speak to that?
This is again, it's one of the gems in the Glenelg Shire, particularly in Portland. As we all know, the local port consists of recreational mariners and fishermen, and it also caters for our commercial fleet, lobsters and trawler fishermen, and etc. etc. And in the previous council, I was on the local port management committee, and quite passionate about it. And because it breaks even, there's no actual cost to council, which is a fantastic outcome for this council.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. Councillor Northcote.
I would like to back up those comments from Councillor McDonald. It's the works that's been going on for the last 3 or 4 years has been excellent and getting good comment around, and I'd just support the local services agreement with the Port of Portland.
With the department, yeah. Thank you, councillors. It's been moved by Councillor Alistair McDonald, second by Councillor Northcote. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Right. Number 8, there's no notices of motion. Number 9, urgent business. And we remove question time, so that's out. And we're going to move into confidential reports. But before we close the meeting and move to confidential reports, perhaps I'd just like to make some comments. We had a cruise ship in last week, Mr. CEO, which was very, very successful. So I'd just like to extend our thanks to the Port of Portland for their wonderful consideration and working with Council, and Mr. CEO, to our staff. It came in 12 hours early, and our staff were able to spin on a dime and get things done. And the commentary of those councillors that were down at the wharf to our visitors was so positive, and they were thrilled to be here. And interestingly enough, because they'd been at sea for so long, because they couldn't dock anywhere, they got off. So we certainly got the benefit of that. Also, councillors, I'd like to, through the CEO, extend to the Caston Sale Yards we came out, we got the best averages of any sale yards across Western Victoria at Casterton through the recent Weena sales. So Casterton topped out at certainly on the leaderboard at 319 cents per kilo. But that doesn't happen with great staff that are there long hours in night leading into these sales, and as Mr. Husband knows, the amount of work that goes into the sale yards. It is a council asset. It provides an income for this council, so please extend to the staff, but also to our primary producers that are local, that have the confidence also to use our local yards and sell their prime produce through our yards. We sincerely thank them as well. So it's a team effort between our primary producers and council working with the local agents to make sure. So a very good outcome, Mr. Husband, for your staff up there, and they're to be congratulated, please. So councillors, without further ado, we do have a confidential report to consider. There is a recommendation on page 31 to close the meeting to the public to consider that confidential report. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move that the council meeting be closed to members of the public pursuant to section 66 2AE and F and section 31F of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following reports.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The report is Independent Audit and Risk Committee appointment. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Second by Councillor Carr. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you for those in attendance. Thank you. Lovely to see you. And we will close the meeting to the public now. Thank you.
They do.